resource for American history life. Today, we are very excited in April to have our presenter, as I mentioned, to be Paula Bagger, who is a longtime member of the former president of the Hingham Historical Society. And we're looking forward to hearing from Paula in a few moments. However, I would like to just turn over the meeting for a moment to Naomi Gordon, who is a wonderful coordinator, program coordinator. But before I do that, let me just give you a little information about congratulatory information on Naomi. Naomi was selected by the Massachusetts Historical Alliance to receive their Rising Star Award. Naomi has engaged herself as an outstanding rising leader in building partnerships to the legacy of history within Massachusetts. Naomi is a recent graduate of Wellesley College. She served as a descendant partnership intern at the Longfellow House in Washington, Washington's headquarters, located on Brattle Street, where she supported the Slave Legacy History Coalition. And eventually, Naomi was hired as our program coordinator, and she's done a wonderful job. So we're very pleased to announce Naomi receiving this award from the Massachusetts Historical Alliance, and well-deserved. A great job to Naomi. So anyway, Naomi, thank you, and thank you. And we're going to turn it over to Naomi.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be the recipient of this award, and being part of this community and meeting all of you, whether that's virtually or in person. So thank you. I'm blushing. And for our announcements today, I do have some other coalition updates. So we are very pleased to announce that we have made an agreement of mutual partnership with the New England Historic Genealogical Society for American Ancestors, who is currently running their 10 Million Names program. And additional information will be soon available on our website. And then later this month, Egypt will be participating as a panelist at the Harvard and the Legacy of Slavery Symposium. So congratulations to her. Very excited to hear her panel. And then next month, Dennis will be inducted as an honorary member into the Society of the First African Families of English America at their annual conference, which will be in Philadelphia this year. So congratulations to Dennis. And then I'm very excited to announce that we have a date for our trip to Deerfield, Massachusetts. It will be June 26th. And it will be primarily to view the Unnamed Figures exhibition, but Historic Deerfield is an outdoor museum with a lot of history, historic houses, and tours that we'll be able to go on. So very excited for that, and more information will be available in a separate email. And then other events in the community. So the Boston Athenaeum has a new exhibit called Framing Freedom, the Harriet Hayden Albums, which will be on view through June 22nd. They are running some curator-led tours of the exhibit, which I did go on. Really wonderful exhibit. I encourage folks to check that out. And then another exhibit, it's an art exhibit at the Danforth Museum of Art in Framingham, which features the artwork of Jennifer Davis Carey and Scarlett Hoey, whose work is at the intersection of art and history. That will be on view through June 2nd. So please check that out as well. I also have a new job posting to share with you all. It's from King's Chapel Boston Memorial Committee. They are looking for a history consultant, and the request for proposal is due April 15th. So that is quick turnaround time, but if you look in our newsletter and just click that job title, all the information will pull up. Again, the deadline for that is April 15th. Also get your taxes in. And Dennis said, thank you again for those who joined us in person and online last month. I just wanted to quickly share this photo we took. So cute. So thank you again for joining us, and also for Mass Historical Society for hosting and their presentation. And finally, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of Sarah Enshaw last March. She was a really important and a significant figure in the community as the first female African-American reporter to be televised in Boston. Maybe some of you knew her personally, or at least knew of her, but she will definitely be missed. And Dennis actually knew Sarah personally. Dennis, I'm wondering if you want to say a few words about that.
Yes. In addition to being my neighbor who lived around the corner, and having known Sarah for many, many years, and always very engaging, very bubbling. And actually, last year, towards the end of summer, I was able to go by her house and spend some time. And she was in good spirits at that time, and not not she was a different Sarah, but certainly very present, in our encounter in our meeting. Always lively, always engaging, and never missed the opportunity to raise the social consciousness of the community in terms of whatever the issue was, or at that time. She will be missed, and she was a very wonderful person. And to her daughter Claire, and Caroline, her granddaughter, we certainly extend our deepest sympathy again to them. So rest in peace, Sarah. Thank you. So
That's it for me for announcements.
thank you very much, Naomi. And we again very pleased to announce your award. So well deserved, and thank you for the wonderful things that you do for the Slave Legacy History Coalition. As I mentioned, today's speaker is Paula Bagger. Paula is a practicing attorney and an amateur historian, and she served as the past president of the Hingham Historical Society and is an amateur historian. And I hope you have had the chance to read her background, which is very exciting, which we included here. And since we met Paula, I met Paula in New York if I'm not mistaken, at the opening. Egypt and we were down for the opening of at the Folk Art Museum of the Hidden Figures exhibition. And it was a wonderful evening, and we met Paula. And so it's been delightful since then. And we're very pleased to have her with us this morning. So I'm going to turn it over to Paula, and she can make her presentation, which we're very excited about. Thank you, Paula.
Excellent. Well, good morning. I'm going to share my screen, and hope that all works okay. Everybody see me? See the screen?
Yes.
See the screen and not me? That's just how I like it. Great. Well, thank you for inviting me to present, Dennis. It's rather daunting to be following the Massachusetts Historical Society on your calendar, but both personally and on behalf of the Hingham Historical Society, I'm honored to be here, and I hope you enjoy this talk. So to open, just a brief introduction, a few words about the Hingham Historical Society. Hingham was one of the oldest English settlements in Massachusetts. Of course, the English were not the first to make a home in Hingham, and we acknowledge that what we today call Hingham, including these three lovely properties you see on the slide, are part of the traditional and ancestral land of the Massachusetts, and we honor them and the land which remains sacred to them. From an early day, White Hingham celebrated its history. In 1827, a lawyer and amateur historian named Solomon Lincoln published the first history of the town. The nation was only 50 years old, but the town was celebrating its bicentennial. And as a lawyer and amateur historian myself, as Dennis said, I'm pleased to follow in his footsteps. Here's our society's mission statement, not particularly extraordinary, and pictures of the 3 properties we're fortunate enough to own. The 1686 Old Ordinary, the 1818 Old Derby Academy, now the Hingham Heritage Museum, and the General Benjamin Lincoln House. Home to 11 generations of the Lincoln family, it was acquired by the Society in 2020 and will be officially opening in just a couple of weeks. And we invite you all to come to Hingham to visit. Now, on to Prince Demah. Around 10 years ago, I was lucky enough to stitch together some threads, and with the assistance of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, confirmed that 2 paintings that the Hingham Historical Society has owned since 1926, the portraits of Christian and Henry Barnes of Marlborough, Massachusetts, are the work of Prince Demah, 1741 to 1778, the earliest known African-American fine artist with surviving identifiable work. This discovery, and I'm putting major air quotes around it, because the attribution was in plain view. And that's one of my points today. But the discovery is significant because it teaches us about the need for public history organizations to be inclusive in their approach to an interpretation of even the most mundane objects. In this case, even a pair of damaged paintings that had been hanging in the House Museum of a suburban historical society for almost 100 years. I say damaged because the paintings were for years considered interesting only because of the tears, which I think you can see in the slide, made by a knife or a sword in the area of the heart of each one. The Barneses were loyalists, and the story was that they were damaged by the Marlborough Patriots when the Barneses' estate was seized during the Revolutionary War. Now, as the story of Prince Demah comes into focus, the emphasis has changed. In addition to his place in the history of art, Prince's life itself, or the little we know about it, teaches us about social, political, and intellectual developments in the 18th century English-speaking world. Also teaches us about the painstaking process of developing even basic facts about the lives of Black, Indigenous, and other marginalized people in our country's history. So we know the Prince was born around 1741 because of the age given in his 1778 death record, 37 years old. He first appears in the record, as you'd say, in his baptismal record about 4 years later. He and his mother, Daphne, were baptized in Trinity Church, an Anglican church in Boston, in 1745. But where was he born and into what family? Records concerning Daphne's, in her later life records, sometimes say she was born in Africa, but whether that is a true geographical fact or a descriptive convention is an open question, as is the question of the surname Demah that Prince comes to use. Is it a real last or family name, or one Prince adopted when he became a free man? Our efforts to discover where Prince was born and raised have also not borne fruit. My working hypothesis is that Daphne and Prince were once enslaved in or around Hingham on Boston's South Shore, and if so, likely by Christian Barnes's family, some of whom had deep roots in Plymouth County. In any event, Prince falls from sight for about 24 years, and in 1769, he reappears in a remarkable series of letters written by Christian Barnes. Most of these letters are to Elizabeth Murray, later the wife of Ralph Inman of Cambridge. Daphne is enslaved by the Barneses at their estate in Marlborough, and Prince, also enslaved, but by someone else, is visiting. Christian writes, "Daphne's son Prince is here, and I am sitting to him for my picture. He has taken a copy of my brother's extremely well, and if mine has the least resemblance, I shall have a strong inclination to send it to you, though it is nothing more than a daub, for he has not proper materials to work with." Prince is thus a known quantity to the Barneses, and before the end of 1769, Henry has purchased him with the stated intention of fostering his artistic talent. This reunites Prince and his mother. And Christian writes, Daphne appears to be much better reconciled to a state of slavery by her son's arrival. Upon the whole, I do not believe there is a happier set of Negroes in any kitchen in the province. So in 1769, Prince is doing a lot of drawing. He may be doing other work as well. Christian doesn't say, but she is engrossed in the project of developing his talent. She worries about how to get him trained as an artist. The self-portrait on this slide is of and by John Singleton Copley. It was made in 1769, the same year Henry Barnes acquires Prince. I've put him here because Copley seems to shimmer in the background of Prince's story at a number of points. Copley was a largely self-taught Boston painter who made portraits of Boston's commercial and upper classes in the 1760s and early 1770s. He was well known and extremely successful at this time. He is 3 years older than Prince. Well, that's not good. Well, that's the wrong direction. Something is frozen. There we go. So Christian Barnes's letters are an amazing resource. They're at the Library of Congress, although they're also reproduced a number of places. And I'm only going to indulge myself once by reading an extended portion of them. But here she's writing about a year after Henry Barnes has purchased Prince. And she writes, he is a most surprising instance of the force of natural genius. For without the least instruction or improvement, he has taken several faces which are thought to be very well done. He has taken a copy of my picture, which I think has more of my resemblance than Copley's. He is now taking his own face. If you should meet in your travels with anyone who is proficient in the art, I wish you could make some inquiries in these particulars, for people in general think Mr. Copling will not be willing to give him any instruction. And you know there is nobody else in Boston that does anything at the business. And I should likewise be obliged to you if you could employ some friend who is a judge of these things to purchase a small appointment of crayons and other materials proper for the business, that he may be kept employed in this way till he has made some further improvement. And then I intend to exhibit him to the public, and don't doubt he will do honor to the profession. I cannot dismiss this subject without acquainting you that this surprising genius has every qualification to render him a good servant, sober, diligent, and faithful. I believe, as he was born in our family, that he is of Tory principles, but of that I am not quite so certain, as he has not yet declared himself. So in February of 1770, things start heating up for Henry Barnes, and you saw that reference to Tories. He is exposed in the Boston paper as one of the audacious Boston merchants who are continuing to import British goods in the face of the non-importation agreements. There were threats against him physically and against his property. In October of 1770, Henry travels to London. He had written a petition to Royal Governor Thomas Hutchinson, which made a big splash among the loyalists here back in Boston, and he's going to take his petition to England. He took Prince with him to England and arranged for him to take lessons from a Mr. Pine, who he reports has taken him purely for his genius. This is almost certainly a reference to British portraitist and history painter Robert Edge Pine. It's ironic that Henry, who was making this trip to present a petition about his mistreatment by the American patriots, wound up placing Prince with Robert Edge Pine. Pine was a Whig, a supporter of the American Revolution, and active in other radical causes. Taking painting lessons with Mr. Pine may have exposed Prince to new ideas, not only artistic, but social and political, including about slavery and the social position of Blacks. Pine's father was John Pine, a famous engraver and believed by some to have been of mixed race. Could this be why Robert Edgepine agreed to take Prince on when everyone seemed to think that Copley would not? One of Pine's other pupils during this period was John Mortimer, a young white English artist who was a friend of formerly enslaved Black musician and writer Ignatius Sancho, here painted by Thomas Gainsborough. There were very progressive circles in 18th century London in which a number of well-known Black men in the arts and letters traveled, and Pine and Mortimer were in the midst of it. Henry may have sensed this. He wrote to Elizabeth Murray that though Prince was doing very well at his painting lessons, he was afraid that Prince might, quote, attempt his freedom. He asked Murray to come to London with her enslaved man. She writes, I want you should return with Bill, for I do not let him, Prince, converse with any of his own color here. And this was not an idle fear on Henry's part. They were in London a year before Somerset's case was decided by Lord Mansfield of the King's Bench. In that case, a Bostonian named Charles Stuart entered England with his enslaved man, James Somerset, excuse me. Somerset ran away and was caught. Stuart tried to sell Somerset to the Caribbean and was prevented from doing so by the court. While the precise ruling in Somerset's case was narrow, Lord Mansfield's statements that slavery as an institution found no support in natural law or the English common law were seized upon by abolitionists on both sides of the Atlantic. In any event, in June of 1771, Henry returns home and Prince comes home with him. But things are different when they get home. Prince has more autonomy. He's moving between Boston and Marlborough by himself. Christian is drumming up business for him. In March of 1772, she writes that he has taken 5 pictures from life since his return, 3 of them as good likenesses as ever Mr. Copling took. She also tries to get him jobs making copies of portraits. These are 3 paintings, all by Copley, that she tried to interest friends in allowing Prince to copy. She succeeded in at least one of those cases. That's the painting on the left, which some of you may have seen at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, the portrait of Elizabeth Murray. In July of 1773, Christian writes Murray to ask a favor, which is that if you have an hour to spare at any time when you are in Boston, you will allow Prince to make some alteration in the copy he has taken from your picture, which he says he cannot do but from life. Starting in January 1773 and on 9 other occasions in that year, this small advertisement appeared in the Boston Newsletter. At Mr. McLean's watchmaker near the townhouse, we call it the Old State House, is a Negro man whose extraordinary genius has been assisted by one of the best masters in London. He takes faces at the lowest rates. Specimens of his performance may be seen at said place. In February of 1773, shortly after the ads start appearing, Prince paints the other surviving work, a portrait of a Scottish merchant named William Duguid. The painting has a wooden stretcher on the back that identifies the artist. And in June 1774, although we don't have the image, we know that Prince made a drawing of the son of merchant Melatiaborn. This receipt provides the start of an answer to 2 questions. 1, who got the money for Prince's work, Prince or the Barneses? And 2, how much did he make off of his work? In this case, at least, It appears as if Prince received the money and signed the receipt. Note the absence of the Barnes in his signature of the name. That is the same signature that appears at the bottom of his will, which we're going to take a look at later, clearly his signature. He received 18 shillings for the drawing, a little less than £1. What does that mean? A little poking around told me that skilled artisans might make between 30 and £100 a year. In 1769, Copley, who was the creme de la creme, made the extraordinary amount of £300, but he probably painted close to 100 paintings. So there's more research to be done, but I thought it was interesting that the discrepancy was not as great as I would have immediately expected. Back to Henry Barnes. In 1775, Christian and Henry leave Massachusetts under threat of violence. They travel to Bristol, England, where many Massachusetts loyalists settled. Prince did not go with them, and nor did Daphne. I think the question I'm most frequently asked, about Prince and the Barneses is, did they manumit him? Did he self-emancipate? And we're reading very few tea leaves here, but it appears to me that his movement towards freedom appears to have been gradual and organic and to have started before the Barneses left. Much scholarly attention has been paid to Massachusetts's 1780 Declaration of Rights, with the statement that all men enjoy equal protection under the law, and some decisions in subsequent legal cases, including the 1783 Walker case, finding slavery inconsistent with that document. But some research, including a recent study of Massachusetts probate records, suggests that history on the ground was more nuanced, as is often the case with legal and constitutional developments, and that slavery had petered out to a noticeable degree, at least, during the 1770s. The article that interprets these probate records concludes, emancipation in Massachusetts seems largely to have resulted from internal negotiations within slaveholding households and changes in attitudes towards slavery. This suggests that the Massachusetts story of freedom was a bottom-up transformation in social relations rather than a legislative or judicial imposition from above. Now, it's far above my pay grade to be telling you whether this is right or wrong globally as a statement of historical fact, but it does seem to be a neat explanation of what I think happened here with Prince and the Barneses. After the Barneses left, Prince lived in Boston. We don't know if his painting career continued after his patron left. Here's a record of his tenancy in a boarding house owned by the Amories, friends and shirt-tail relations of the Barneses, which may or may not be a coincidence. Notably, it is an integrated boarding house that he's living in. Prince appears to have forged relationships with other free Black men. He's identified in the 1795 document, posthumous, that admits Daphne to the Boston almshouse as having been a Mason. And Prince Taylor, the executor of his will, was an early Prince Hall Mason. Further research may shed light on these relationships. In 1777, Prince joins the Massachusetts militia as a matros in Thomas Craft's artillery train. The matros had the job of defending and reloading arms during battle. In other words, those are the guys that stand in front of the cannon and clean it out in between shots. His company appears to have had 3 principal assignments during his period of enlistment. And the last of them is probably what did Prince in. In February of 1778, his company was assigned to guard the West End Hospital where smallpox inoculation was taking place. And Prince made his will on March 8th, 1778, describing himself as a limner and leaving everything to his mother, Daphne. And you can see in the lower corner is the signature from the manuscript will at the State Archives, and it's the same signature that we saw previously. Prince's death is recorded at Trinity Church, Boston, the same church where he was baptized. And the church record describes him as Prince Demah, free Negro. So from an art historical perspective, Prince takes a place in the chronology of African-American fine artists and artisans. The timeline of Black fine artists had historically always started with Joshua Johnson of Baltimore, born enslaved and later free, who achieved success making portraits primarily of white family groups in early Republican Maryland. Prince Demah is a half a generation or a generation older. The portrait on the right, which is one of the rare portraits that Johnson did of a Black man, was in the exhibition down at the Folk Art Museum that Dennis was referring to, and that we saw it down there. Historians in New England and elsewhere are uncovering the stories of Black artists and artisans who worked for white artists and artisans during the colonial period, and whose work is slowly becoming recognized. An example is Peter Fleet, enslaved by Thomas Fleet, a Boston newspaperman, who set type but also created engraved pictures for the newspaper. And if you see that engraving on the right-hand side, you can see the initials PF, which could have been Peter Fleet or Pompey Fleet. I can't remember if they were father and son or brothers, both enslaved by Thomas Fleet. And we are coming to appreciate how difficult it was for a free Black artist or artisan to keep a business going during that period. We have learned a great deal about the difficulties faced by Phyllis Wheatley during the second chapter of her life. So we think about the challenges Prince faced and what might have happened or not have happened to his art career if he had survived the Revolutionary War. So the idea of uncovering the stories and the work of Black artists and artisans leads to my larger point about the role of local organizations. We need to look at properties and artifacts with a fresh set of eyes, informed by our recognition that the contributions of Black and other historic marginally people have been overlooked, because Prince provides a textbook example. On the right-hand side of this paper, right-hand side of this slide is a paper that is affixed to the back of Christian Barnes's portrait in the donor's handwriting, attributing the portraits to Copley. And it says something about what a researcher finding what she wants to find, or perhaps what she's acclimatized to find, that this donor, Susan Barker Willard, poured through Christian Barnes's letters, the ones I've quoted here and many, many more of them, and took note of the several times Christian mentions Copley and concludes that these paintings were Copley's, while studiously overlooking the far more frequent comments that Christian made in her letters about Prince taking her picture, taking the picture of others, copying Copley's, creating a picture of her that was far more lifelike in her opinion than Copley's, etc., etc. And I don't mean to make too much fun of Susan Barker Willard, pictured on the left, dressed in colonial garb before the hearth of her 17th century cottage in Hingham. Perhaps I'm making a little fun by having picked that picture, but she was a fine and a progressive woman of her day, but she was nonetheless very much a product of her era. The colonial revival, the era in which many local historical societies, at least in the New England area, were launched. And Ms. Willard and other founders of the Hingham Historical Society in 1914 were really catching a cresting wave of this movement, which looked back to our colonial and early Republican past. They did great work preserving structures, and papers and artifacts. But there was another aspect to it which worked to narrow the field of inquiry. During a period of high immigration, lineage associations and a focus on lineage became very popular. And an emphasis on the founding fathers and the heroes of the Revolutionary War focused on particular people and a particular take on our founding stories and the rise of our governmental institutions. So in the photo on the left, we see the portrait of Christian Barnes on the parlor wall of Susan Barker Willard's 17th century home in Hingham. When she died, she bequeathed the cottage's contents to the very young Hingham Historical Society, which used them to furnish its new, at that point, new house museum, the Old Ordinary. And that's, you can see in the picture on the right, is about, oh, I don't know, maybe it's 15 years ago, the Barnes portraits on the wall of the Old Ordinary. The Museum of Fine Arts very soon disabused the society of the attribution to Copley. And so they hung the paintings on the wall and essentially talked about the tears in the breast. But this is why I am so excited to think that if we continue to re-examine our buildings and our holdings through a more inclusive lens, something else might be hanging behind a door, or as here, or relegated to storage, which was the case of the portrait of William Duguid at the time I first spoke to the Met about this. So here's a snapshot that I took at the Metropolitan in 2016 when I went to visit Prince, who had just been newly installed in the Colonial Arts Gallery down there. The painting on the left of Mr. Duguid is by John Smebert, a well-known 18th century American portraitist. Smebert enslaved a man named Cuffy. When Cuffy ran away, the advertisement placed in newspapers described his breeches, quote, stained with diverse sorts of paints, unquote. So Cuffy likely made pigments for John Smebert, but what else might he have done? And then Henry and Christian traveled down to New York City last fall, as Dennis mentioned, to be part of a show at the Museum of Folk Art called Unnamed Figures, Black Presence and Absence in the Early American North. And there's me looking like a proud mama with Emily Gavalt, the curator of the show. As Dennis said, this show is now currently at Historic Deerfield, and it looks as if you have a field trip planned, which is great, and I encourage everyone to go. And that's all I have to say, so I will stop my share.
Well, Paula, thank you very, very, very much. I must point out that Emily is the daughter of Grace Gavalt, who was on who was here today. So hello, Grace. So there she is right here. So and the interesting thing about what's been taking place, certainly over the last couple of months with the Massachusetts Historical Society and now with the Hingham Historical Society, is to give a perspective of how African Americans were enslaved during that time period and what their engagements were. Again, as I had mentioned, last month at the Mass Historical Society, a perception of slavery generally focuses on the cotton fields of Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia. That's kind of the perception. When we reach beyond that and we go and we look at what's happened in Lexington, as Dr. Bellinger mentioned, in his presentation, and currently, what's being presented here in Hingham. So, Paula, we appreciate this, and we hope that the depth of what again is being spoken to is slavery existed Brattle Street in the North, and it engaged. It not only took a portion of people's lives, but also it talks about these presentations have of what they were able to accomplish outside of that, confinement. We do have some chats. Naomi, can you kind of just go through some questions? Thank you, Paula. Thank you. That was
Sure, sure. Happy to answer questions.
yes, we have
Yes,
some.
thank you, thank you. So we're now in the Q&A portion. So I'll take a look at the chat, but as always, if people want to just raise their hand and speak their question, that is also welcome. So this is a comment for Lamergy Frazier. Paula, thank you for your work as a Black artist. I'm excited about Prince's history to add to what we know about African descended artists in the 18th and 19th century. I agree. I think it's really, really important history. Ellen Miller, thanks, Paula, for your incredible research. Each time I hear you, you've added to the story. Your work has reshaped what we do at the I don't quite know what that
The
stands
Old
for.
Ordinary. Yeah, that's it. Ellen's one of my plants in the audience from the Hingham Historical Society.
Oh, gotcha. And we will continue to do so. I'm glad to say it is well received. Deborah Javal, thank you for allowing the portraits to be seen at the American Art Museum. Great photo of you and Emily. Patrick Gabridge, thanks for this. Do you think it's likely or possible that other portraits by Prince Demah might be out there waiting to be discovered?
Thank you for asking that. There's no question that there are, assuming they survive. But at the point at which we were doing this work, and the bulk of the work we were doing, I guess it's around almost 10 years ago, I made a list of the pictures that Christian had described. You know, he did a picture of this, he did a picture of that. And we tried to circulate them to various organizations. Amelia Peck from the Met talked to the big dogs, and I talked to the littler dogs, who would return my phone call. And, we haven't come up with anything yet, but there's no question they're there. The portrait of William Duguid was found in a secondhand store in Worcester. And as I say, I've given the history of where's ours are. And I'm certainly happy to share with anybody this little sort of running list of what other surviving pictures might be.
And then more comments, mostly just saying how wonderful the presentation was.
Well, that's okay.
Keep them coming.
Yeah.
So fascinating and so many connections between this and other presentations we've heard. I agree. And tremendous presentation, groundbreaking idea that Demah predated Joshua Johnson, changes the history books.
Yeah, it's worth noting there is one other name that comes up as a peer of Prince Demah's, but we have no work. We just have references, and that's a man named Scipio Moorhead, who was also enslaved in Boston. And there are people write about Scipio Moorhead doing this or that, but there are no works. There are some who say or suspect that Moorhead may have created that engraving of Phyllis Wheatley that appears on the frontispiece of the poetry book, the one that I had on the slide before, but no particular documentation of it.
And then Patrick asks, does this make you think there might have been other pre-revolutionary enslaved portraits in New York or Philadelphia?
I think there's, little question that there was. Prince is kind of an odd story because he just pops up and he's in a family that are traders. I think it's much more likely to find for the story to be somebody like that I mentioned, Cuffy, who was enslaved by John Smeebert, and would have been, although enslaved, working, more like an apprentice or an indentured worker, in an art studio, and getting trained up that way. The main difference being a large difference that he was not free to leave, but the training would be the same, and the work the same. You start by mixing paints, and then and then you move on. So I would think, particularly in New York and Philadelphia, which I think were probably larger. There are probably more people painting portraits in those cities than in Boston.
Mhm. Mhm. That's
Okay.
That's it in the chat, but if anybody has any
Yeah, if
comments or
anybody-
anything.
Oh, I've stunned them into silence. Oh, well.
I actually have a question. I don't know if I missed it as you were talking about it. But the portrait, excuse me, but the portraits that ended up in Hingham, for how long did the Historical Society think that they were made by Copley? And I guess, can you talk a little bit more about
I think
that
the Historical Society
process?
didn't think so for long, because I think that they were bequeathed to the Historical Society in 1926. And if you think somebody's left you a copy, the first thing you do is take it to the Museum of Fine Arts or somebody to say, is this true? And the Museum of Fine Arts said, no, it's not. And then I don't think anybody took many more steps to figure out what they were after that. The portraits, I think, came to Hingham probably in the no later than the 1830s. They then took a
wasn't here
sort
for
of
a minute.
interesting, given this show, they then traveled out to Deerfield and lived in Deerfield for a few years, and then came back to Hingham. But they were in the same family for a while. The real question is, how did they get from the Barnes's estate to Hingham? And I think it was Prince's mother, who seemed to have some relationship to Hingham. She would, for the rest of her life, come and visit Hingham. I mean, people talk, oh, Daphne is coming, that sort of thing. And the Barneses had a lot of paintings, and they had these two. And I don't know, speaking as a mother, if I had all these paintings in front of me and I had to pick two to take, I'd pick the two that my kid painted. And take them off and let somebody else have the rest of them, Yeah, that one might be Copley, but my kid painted this one. But that's just supposition at this point. We need to try and find something more.
Definitely lots of threads to keep following. Then comment, Phyllis Wheatley gives a tribute to Scipio Moorhead in her poems to underscore his talent and devotion. And then we also have a couple more questions coming in. So Brian asks, how often or how likely is it that receipts for work are found? Is this rare? Might there be more of these types of documents?
So it is really, it's a needle in the haystack kind of project. A big shout out to the Massachusetts Historical Society, where I did a great deal of my research. But I think that the archivist probably thought I was crazy, because I'd order up a big box and really just go like, and then hand it back, because I was looking for, such specific granular things, It's becoming easier with digitization. That Maladia Bourne receipt, that is because the Harvard Business School is digitizing its historical holdings. And that was at the Harvard, in some file at the Harvard Business School, and I never would have found it, right? Because why would you look in the Bourne family papers at the Harvard Business School, except that it was online and digitized, and so it popped up.
Mhm.
And then I'm having trouble keeping up with the comments. All of a sudden they keep coming. And then Mimi asks, how long did your research take to get to this point? What tipped you off to get started?
What tipped me off to get started were some letters that we had at the Hingham Historical, well, we had the painting, and then we had some letters at the Hingham Historical Society between Christian Barnes and a woman in Hingham named Deborah Barker. And they were wonderful letters, and both of them, I know it sounds silly, but they both sound like Jane Austen in their letters. And it's just, you know, they're fun to read, and they talk so much about their lives. And they both keep talking about this woman named Daphne. It really all started with Daphne. And at first I, thought that Daphne was sort of somebody's crazy old aunt or something that came from Boston to visit every once in a while. And then it became clear who Daphne was. And my research started there. And then I moved on to prints. I wasn't focused on the paintings at first. I mean, Daphne's life in itself is a whole nother PowerPoint, because she was she was also left behind on the estate and had, various petitions for support, to the town, to the general court, sort of how she made her way in life for the 20 years between when the Barnes left and her death is also interesting.
And then next question, Cushing asks, is there any research linking portraitist Cuffey to Paul Cuffey, the New Bedford sea captain and merchant?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's an interesting thought.
And then there's just a couple questions about recordings. So this recording will be available on our YouTube channel. If people have trouble accessing that, you can email me, and I'll drop my new email address below. We are inspired by your work and research. You cover an amazing geographical story of the spaces enslaved people occupied despite the circumstances of slavery. Agreed. And it really shows the diversity of the different ways, as Dennis said, enslaved people, the kind of work that they did, in challenging misconceptions of slavery.
So I have
yes.
a question I want to shout out in case anybody in the studio audience. I think that one of the questions people always ask me is, how do you pronounce the guy's last name? And I just started saying Demah. I don't have the slightest idea, but I figure there have to be people who I guess I'm assuming that it's West African, and that if anybody knows anything about Demah, whatever, you can contact me, let me know, or anything about the name itself, which is a little bit mysterious to me. Again, whether it really could have been a family name or whether it was, he just picked something that wasn't Barnes once the Barneses were gone. So if anybody has any learning on that, I would love to. I'd love to hear about it.
Wonderful. And 3 minutes to the half hour, so I think we have a little bit more time for questions. Emily asks, were any of Daphne's petitions for support successful?
Yes. I mean, she was supported at first by the town of Marlborough, and then by the Commonwealth. I think Daphne was kind of a pistol too. We actually have a letter that she wrote, and transcribed for her, but that she wrote to Christian Barnes in England in the 1780s, providing her all the gossip about who was getting pregnant out of wedlock and stuff like that. I mean, and I think that Daphne was a force of nature, and Daphne didn't want to stay in Marlborough. She wanted to be in Boston. And so the Marlborough, essentially welfare authorities, are very upset about this and going to cut her off. But then one of the Barnes's friends got her some support from the general court. I think I said something about Africa being a convention. I mean, the way it worked is that you were, for welfare purposes, you were the problem of the place where you were born. And people who weren't born in Massachusetts were the problem of the state government. And so she did file a petition saying, I, Daphne, was born in Africa. And the question is, was she born in Africa, or was that sort of just the person who wrote the petition for her said, okay, well, that's the way to get the general court to support you, as opposed to the town of Marlborough or the city of Boston. In other words, she may have had a good lawyer. But yeah, she did get her support.
Oh, thank you very
Yeah.
much. Very, very informative session here that we've had here today, Paula, and we really appreciate it. And we're going to encourage people to travel down to Hingham, to the Hingham Historical
Please
Society.
do.
Yes,
Please.
you know, you have an opportunity. At the point of missing people, I do want to just do a couple of shout outs. I do see Shelley Murphy from the University of Virginia, and Shelley will be presenting in September, and she's a professor of a number of genealogy. I know she does focus on. So Shelley will be presenting in September. Also, I did want to mention that we will be having a presentation on Prince Hall. I'm a Prince Hall Mason, so I just need to make that connection, you know, and to have somebody present at some future date. There's been a number of inquiries about, and certainly as we have gone through our sessions where the Prince Hall has come up and his relationship to the legacy of slavery and its history and enslaved people as we move forward. Also, Ken Reeves, I want to say I do want to work on a project with you, so I'm going to email you about something if you're certainly available to do so. There are so many other, it's always good to see Quishin, Paula, Bill, you know, Dr. Harrison, so many people here that we, you know, have seen regularly on a basis. And and Mimi will be presenting in June. Yes, June. So from the history Jamaica Plain Historical Project or Society, and which is interesting because I went to high school in Jamaica Plain, Mass, and I graduated from there. So when I stumbled across this, I said, "Oh, gee, that's interesting." I never thought about Jamaica Plain and being a place where slavery had occurred, you know, during the earlier days of its existence. So that will be something that I'm certainly very interested in. Again, Ellen, always good to see Bill, yeah, Paula, and so you know we're glad to see so many. We do have one other just announcement. You will be receiving a flyer. We're a little late on this. Hopefully, we can pull it together on June 20th. Trip to Deerfield, historic Deerfield, to view the hidden figures exhibition, a wonderful exhibition, which was first pulled together and curated, like I said, by Deborah Gavalt's daughter, Emily. And we will be taking the trip out. It'll be a day trip. We'll be leaving from Harvard Square. The trip will include not only a tour of the Deerfield exhibition, but lunch at Deerfield Inn and a tour of the grounds in that area. So, and that'll be all inclusive in what the trip cost will be, which will be minimal, as minimal as it can be. But we look forward to hopefully seeing you, many of you join us. So that information will be going out this week. We're sorry that it's late, but we kind of, you know, backed up and pulling things together. So that will be June 26th, a day trip from Harvard Square to Deerfield spending the day there, tour and lunch at the historic Deerfield Inn, and returning to Harvard Square later that afternoon. So again, please look forward to receiving that information. Does anyone else have anything before we say goodbye? I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to thank Paula, certainly. Again, Paula, it was a wonderful exhibition. Thank you very much for for your timeliness and information and what you presented today. And we look forward.
Yeah, so let me just say that if anybody has any questions or wants to talk to me about it or has any insights on anything, my email address is just my name, Paula Bagger @gmail.com. And I would love to hear from anybody.
Okay. Paula Bagger @gmail.com. And you can ask us, and we have it, so Naomi can forward it to you also. So thank you. Thank you very much, all of you. We wish you a good day, and thank you for joining us again. And we look forward to seeing you in May. We're in April, May. And who's going to be? Oh, Jonathan. Naomi, who? Jonathan.
John Butchell, I think.
Butchell.
Y'all will see in the next newsletter. Don't worry.
Right. John Butchell is the curator at the New England Athenaeum. And if any of you are familiar with the Athenaeum, they have a vast reservoir of history and certainly on the legacy of slavery. So again, that should be a very interesting one, and that will be in May. And then June will be Mimi from the History Jamaica Plain, and then Shelley from Virginia, and we're looking forward. And then a very close friend of mine, and certainly fraternity, is Carl McNair. We look forward to having Carl is the brother of Ron McNair. Ron McNair, who you may know, was unfortunately, he was an astronaut who was lost his life in the Challenger tragedy. Graduate at MIT, a good friend, good family friend, and it was his brother has carried on his legacy through the Ron McNair Foundation, and has a number of very interesting historical background to Ron's evolution to MIT, to where he became a scientist and eventually an astronaut on the Challenger, and then that fateful trip. So again, the legacy and history, pre and post, what has taken place. So that will be later this year.
One thing I wanted to add to what you said about Rod McNair, a wonderful person, but he's also the first person and maybe the only person to play saxophone in space. They didn't keep the tapes of it, but he did play a saxophone when he went up one time. So
he did do that. That's very good. Thank you, Bill. And it was a black belt, very, very proficient and in that field. So that's coming down. So we have, as we begin to move along, we appreciate everyone joining with us, and we hopefully we'll see you on our trip to Deerfield, and congratulations to Naomi again, who's done a wonderful job for us. She does, I really, thank you. So anyway, and Paula, thank you, and and to all of you, have a good day, and we'll see you later. See everyone later. Okay.
all right, thanks.
Thank you.
You.